Today's video I'll be recapping a film from 1995 titled, Powder. Before we begin, don't forget to like and subscribe for more movie recaps. At the hospital, a pregnant woman named Anne is being rushed inside after she was struck by lightning, which caused her to go into labor. Hours go by, and eventually, the doctor informs her husband Greg, that Anne died after giving birth. He tells Greg that the baby is okay, but he is concerned that it may have some abnormalities, and they can already tell that he has no pigmentation. But that seems to be the cause of albinism, which is strictly a genetic defect. Greg demands to be taken to see his son, and the doctor takes him into the room in which the baby is being incubated. The doctor informs him that the wires bridging from the incubator to the machine alongside it are there for the purpose of measuring the baby's brain waves. Greg begins to cry, and after staring at the baby, he stands there in denial and refuses to accept the baby as his child due to its appearance. The baby becomes increasingly distressed and cries as well, as if it can sense the bitter thoughts and emotions running through Greg's mind in that moment. As Greg is led out of the room, the baby's brain wave readings go off the charts. Nearly 2 decades later, Sheriff Barnum calls Jessie Caldwell, the director of the local youth shelter, over to the farmhouse of a recently deceased old man. He takes her into the house, showing her a broken cup on the living room floor, telling her that the old man died of a heart attack the night before, and was discovered by the neighbors that morning. Before leading her into the basement, he tells her the reason he called her over. There is a boy hiding in the basement who refuses to come out, and he didn't know who else to call to talk to him but Jessie. He says that the neighbors say the boy is deformed, and over the many years that he stayed there, none of them had actually gotten a good look at him, leading the sheriff to believe that the boy is the old man's grandson who he hid in the basement to avoid him being seen by the public. They cautiously make their way into the basement, and find the boy hiding in a corner in the dark. Jessie reaches out to the boy, and as he steps into the light, they are spooked by his pale, hairless skin, and purple eyes. They ask his name, to which he replies that his grandparents called him Powder, but his name is Jeremy Reed. Sheriff Barnum leaves to get Jessie and Jeremy something to eat while she talks to him. She asks Jeremy why he didn't call the police or anybody when his grandfather collapsed, and he tells her that his granddad always told him that if anyone ever saw him, they'd try to take him away. Jeremy tells her that he's never been to school, but he's read all of the books in the basement. She pulls out a book, which she claims is difficult for most college students, and opens up to a random page. Jeremy asks her to give him a page number and she gives him the same page number, 216. Jeremy then reads out the first paragraph of that page, word for word, and tells her to do the same with any other book she wants and he will read for her. Jeremy eventually leaves the basement with Jessie. As he walks outside, all of the police sirens and radios go off and begin to malfunction. When Jessie drives off with Jeremy, Sheriff Barnum notices that, strangely, there are about a dozen lightning rods on the roof of the house. Officer Harley Duncan then tells Barnum that he has a bad feeling about Jeremy, and the doctors had informed him that although the old man had died of a heart attack, his heart had fibrillated, indicating that he may have been electrocuted. When Jeremy steps out of the car, the other kids stop in their tracks and stare at him. Inside, Jessie calls the chairman and arranges for Jeremy to take an IQ test. At lunchtime, Jeremy sits alone at a table. A group of teens decide to come over and mess with him. One teen, a 30-something-year-old man named John, begins to insult Jeremy for his appearance. John tells Jeremy that the first day at the shelter, the new guy has to wear a spoon. He tells his friend Mitch to provide a demonstration. Mitch balances the spoon on his nose while everybody else laughs at how ridiculous he looks. Jeremy takes the spoon from John, and then he begins to control it, just like he did in The Matrix. He then makes the spoon stand on the table, and it pulls all the other spoons towards it, creating a tower of spoon at the table center. Everyone is scared, but John is pissed off, believing Jeremy to be some kind of freak. When Barnum returns to his home after the day's shift, he finds his son Stephen at the doorstep. We can see that Barnum holds some strong animosity towards his son, as he completely ignores him while Stephen becomes scared and nervous as he leaves. Upstairs, Barnum goes to check up on his terminally ill wife, who is dying of cancer, and is so sick that she can't open her eyes or even speak. We see lots of painkillers on top of the drawer, and a small silver box which Maxine, his wife's caretaker, tells him that Stephen had brought for his mother. The next morning, after the doctor confirms that Jeremy is perfectly healthy, Jessie asks him if he would like to attend school the following week, which he agrees to. At school, the science teacher Mr. Donald Ripley is teaching the students about electric current. He turns off the light and switches on a Jacob's ladder machine, to demonstrate how electricity travels. While he's talking, Jeremy becomes extremely uncomfortable and clutches onto his desk as he begins to tremble. The machine begins to emit more and more sparks at a greater intensity, until it shoots a bolt of electricity from one of the 2 electrodes into Jeremy's chest. The bolt then makes its way through his other nipple and into the adjacent electrode. As the electricity runs through Jeremy, he is carried out of his chair and suspended in the air. Unable to unplug the machine, Mr. Ripley breaks it with a chair and Jeremy falls onto the ground. As the students rush out of the classroom, Ripley approaches an unconscious Jeremy, and touches him on the shoulder, which immediately lifts all of the hairs on his forearm and carries him into a sort of subconscious state. At the hospital, Dr. Wayne doesn't believe Mr. Ripley's description of the event, as such electrical shock would kill or at least burn someone, but Jeremy is totally fine. Ripley comes to the conclusion that Jeremy's body is constantly going through the process of electrolysis, which explains why hair can't grow on him. The nurse then informs them that Jeremy has run away from the hospital. While on the road back to his granddad's house, Jeremy meets Lindsey, a girl from his class who witnessed the event. While they talk, some of the neighbors stare at Jeremy. Jeremy looks back at them, and tells Lindsey that he can hear people's thoughts and memories, including things they don't even know about themselves, but she believes he might be hallucinating as a result of being electrocuted. After she tells him how to get to the interstate bridge, he continues on his journey. On the bridge, Sheriff Barnum and Officer Duncan intercept Jeremy and force him to turn back. In Barnum's van, he asks Jeremy why he doesn't like hospitals, to which he replies that the worst day of his life that he can remember took place in a hospital. When Barnum asks which day that was, Jeremy says that it was the day he was born. Back at the school, Jeremy is called into the conference room to discuss the results of his IQ test. The chairman, Dr. Stippler, tells Jeremy that his IQ scored right off the charts. He further notes that there isn't even a classification for someone as intelligent as Jeremy is. Jeremy says that he just wants to go back to his granddad's home, but Jesse delivers the sad news that the bank now owns the house. The next day, Barnum and Officer Duncan take the kids at the youth shelter out camping in the woods. While Jeremy sits by himself away from the rest of the group, Barnum joins him. A thunderstorm comes up, and Jeremy becomes concerned, telling Barnum that when he hears thunder outside, he can feel it inside. And when lightning comes down, he feels it wanting to come to him. He says that his grandmother always told him that the storm came from God. He asks Barnum if he believes in God. And Barnum says that he doesn't. The next morning Jeremy travels deeper into the woods. He places his hands onto the ground and all the geckos become drawn to him. As he picks one up, the other geckos begin to scatter in fear. He then calls out to John and Mitch, who had been hiding behind a nearby tree, observing him. He notices the gun in John's hand. John raises it and takes aim, telling Jeremy that he can finish him off right then and there, and there'd be one less freak in the world. Then, a gunshot goes off in the distance. All 3 of them run towards it. Jeremy finds a group of boys circled around a dying deer which had been shot in the heart. Officer Duncan runs towards the deer, gun in hand, and boasts about how experienced he is, taking pride in his kill. As Jeremy's eyes fill with tears, he feels the pain and fear the deer is going through in its last moments. Jeremy kneels down and puts one hand on the deer's neck, and grabs Duncan's wrist with the other. He proceeds to transfer the pain and fear from the deer into Duncan. As the deer convulses, the pain Duncan feels increases. John threatens to shoot Jeremy if he doesn't let go, but Jeremy just stares down the barrel of the gun. As John pulls the trigger, Mitch lifts the gun, saving Jeremy's life. The sound of the gunshot causes Jeremy to let go of Duncan's wrist. Afterwards, Duncan is so afraid that the entire group has to hold him down just to keep him from running into the woods. After Duncan is admitted into county hospital, Jesse asks Jeremy what happened out in the woods. After he tells her he just wants to go home, she claims to be his friend who just wants to help. This sends him into a fit of rage as he tells her that friends don't take you away from home and lock you up. As he goes on, the lights, the frames on the wall and the glass panel on the door shatter to pieces. He then asks her how much longer she thinks he'll let her keep him there, before storming out the room, leaving her in shock. That night, when Barnum returns home, Dr. Wayne tells him that his wife's condition is extremely bad and she is going through the worst pain of her life. Barnum tells him that he doesn't know why his wife chooses to hold on, but there must be a reason why she refuses to pass away. The doctor says that he will never know as his wife is so sick that she's beyond communication now, and there's no way to get into her head to find out. At the lunchroom in the youth center, Mr. Ripley comes to talk to Jeremy. He tells Jeremy that when he touched him while he was unconscious on the classroom floor, he felt a surge of energy run through his body unlike he's ever felt before. This energy acted like a powerful drug, as it made him feel like he was 20 all over again. He tells Jeremy that Einstein once said that if humans could one day unlock 100% of their brains, they'd become pure energy. He believes that something may have happened to Jeremy a long time ago, which unlocked 100% of his brain's capacity, and as a result, Jeremy gives off and is surrounded by that same energy Einstein was referring to. He tells Jeremy that he believes his mind is what the human race will one day evolve to, and he wants to be Jeremy's friend, so that he can learn as much as possible from him. The next morning Barnum goes over to Duncan's place to check up on him. He notices that Duncan has gotten rid of all his guns, which is very strange considering there's nothing he loves more than hunting. He is worried that Duncan may become a liability as he refuses to carry his gun as a police officer as well. Outside, Duncan tells Barnum what happened when he shot the deer, about how Jeremy transferred its pain into him. He tells Barnum that in that moment he not only felt the deer die but he also felt as if he had become the deer, able to feel all of its pain, emotions and experience its memories. He says that since that day he's been so traumatized that he can't hold a gun anymore. Hearing this, Barnum has an idea. That night, he asks Jeremy if he'll accompany him to his house, and takes him upstairs to see his wife. He asks Jeremy if he can communicate with his wife and find out what he has to do in order for her to move on. Jeremy gently touches her forehead and begins to hear her speak within her mind. She says that she can't go yet, not until Barnum forgives and accepts Stephen. Barnum remains stubborn, unwilling to forgive him, but she tells him to remember when Stephen was a child, and all three of them played in the snow together. She lost her wedding ring while they were playing that day and Barnum and Stephen looked for it for hours. Barnum recalls how Stephen came home from school every day to dig up the snow banks looking for the ring. As tears roll down her cheeks, Jeremy tells Barnum that she wants him to open the silver box that Stephen had brought a few days ago. He opens it to find the ring inside, and he begins to cry. Jeremy tells him how Stephen told her he found the ring while renovating the garden at their old house. After Barnum puts the ring on his wife's finger, Jeremy touches Barnum's wrist with his other hand and Barnum begins to hear his wife's voice in his mind. He tells her that everything will be okay, and as he hugs her, she opens her eyes one last time before she finally passes on. Stephen rushes over to the house, and when he gets there, Barnum embraces him as they both begin to cry. A few days later Jeremy goes on a date with Lindsey at the county fair. Jeremy asks her if she thinks he is ugly, like his father did. She tells him that he has the most beautiful face she's ever seen, and then she kisses him. Lindsey's father sees Jeremy kissing her, and confronts him. Her dad attacks him, calling him all kinds of names and referring to him as a thing rather than a person. Jesse quickly intervenes, and shouts out Lindsey's father's name, which unsurprisingly is Dick. After causing a scene, Dick insults Jeremy one last time before leaving with Lindsey. Heartbroken, Jeremy packs his things and attempts to return to the one place he was accepted, his granddad's home. As he leaves the youth shelter, he hears some commotion coming from the gym and curiously enters to find the other teens playing basketball. John then confronts him and takes his hat. When he tries to take it back, John tells him to take his best shot if he thinks he's man enough to get the hat back. Immediately, Jeremy sees into John's memories, and begins to recall for him the day his stepdad took his hat when he was just a little boy. The hat was the only thing his father, who had died, had left behind for him. When his drunk stepdad took the hat, he said the same thing to John, to take his best shot if he thinks he's man enough. When John tried to get the hat back, his stepdad beat him bloody, and his scars were so dark he had to skip gym practice. Hearing this, John becomes emotional and threatens to kill Jeremy. A thunderstorm then begins and John drags Jeremy out into the rain and he and his friends strip Jeremy naked. He tells Jeremy that he's too pale and he needs some color, before throwing him into a puddle of mud. When they drag Jeremy back up, John tells him that he'll never fit in. Jeremy then becomes so sad and angry that he lets out a burst of energy that sends everyone, including himself, flying onto their backs. When Mitch checks on John, he realizes that his heart stopped beating. Jeremy quickly administers a few electric shocks to his chest and he is revived. Mitch then offers to help Jeremy get away and back to his granddad's home. He sneaks him onto a van that's heading towards the farm. When Jeremy gets back to his granddad's house, he sees that everything, including his bed and all his books in the basement, are gone. Jessie speeds up to the house and consoles him, assuring him she'll find a place for him that he can call home. Mr. Ripley joins them as they make their way out. They are then stopped by Barnum and Duncan, who have come to arrest and take back Jeremy. Jessie pleads with Barnum to let Jeremy go, and he agrees. Jeremy then tells Barnum that when his wife died she didn't just go away, he felt her go somewhere, which brings a smile to Barnum's face. Jeremy then runs into the field and they all chase after him. The clouds then part and a bolt of lightning strikes him in the chest as energy flows through him. The energy builds until Jeremy emits a blast of vibrant energy that radiates throughout the field as he vanishes and the clouds come back together. As they all look up at the sky, Barnum begins to cry as he develops faith and begins to believe in the afterlife. He now knows his wife didn't just die but she lived on somewhere up above, where she must be watching over and awaiting him. As they all stare at the clouds, the sky lets out one last roar of thunder. The end. Thanks so much.